We appreciate the San Diego JACL inviting us to participate in your event. I'm Linda Canada. I'm a past president of the Japanese American Historical Society of San Diego, and I served as the archivist for the organization for about 12 years. So I see many familiar names on the list, and I'm glad that people from the past that I've dealt with are here to participate. Jack Kubota is a relatively recent active participant in our Speakers Bureau, but boy, what a dynamo he is, and I know you guys are going to enjoy hearing from him. Jack does live in Carlsbad. He is, do you mind if I say your age? 93 years old and still working as a civil engineer, and just a ball of energy. And we enjoy doing these interviews together. We've done them at the public library. We've done them for senior centers around the county. We've done them for various levels of schools. And so I hope you guys enjoy this interview with Jack. We use kind of this guided interview where Jack and I have already talked about what the questions are and what his answers are. So I just kind of help him do a complete answer if he's left off something that I think is kind of interesting and ought to be included. So the very first starter question, Jack, for you and everybody, I'd like you to meet Jack Kubota. But Jack, tell me a little bit about your family and what your parents did for a living before World War II. Where did you live? Where'd you go to school?
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I have to admit I'm a grouchy old guy at 93, just had a birthday. And yes, I'm a Nisei. My dad was immigrated to this country. I think at that time in 1905 or 6, he was labeled an undocumented or something, but he had immigrated to Mexico. And then after 1 year at a silver mine in Mexico, he was told that there's a better place than where he came to from Japan. And at the silver mine, he met I met a fellow Japanese immigrant, and his name was Masao Suzuki. And so the two of them and one other guy decided they'd come to California, and they landed in California in 1906. And then I ended up in the Japanese underground, ended up in Central Valley until in the 1915, his buddy Suzuki told him that he had a kid sister in Japan, and through an arranged picture bride situation, mom and dad got married in 1915. And then they moved to Pasadena, California. So our family are all native Californians. Our family was 6 siblings. I have 4 older sisters, 1 older brother, and yours truly. So I was born in 29, and I have 1 older brother who just turned 95, and so the 2 of us carry on our family name of Kubota. So then just chugging along, although we were all from Imperial Valley, from Pasadena, our family moved to Imperial Valley into a town called El Centro in October of 1929. So I call my hometown El Centro, California. It's the capital of Imperial Valley, a 400,000 acre, food basket. And because of that, in fact, at the time of the Army picking us all up, there was something like 1,500 Iseis and Niseis in Imperial Valley, and we lived in the city because my dad started out after working in the Central Valley area. He ended up driving a truck, and driving a truck, he ended up in Imperial Valley starting to haul produce from the Imperial Valley Issei farmers to the Los Angeles market. And so there, that was the beginning of our family as I saw it as a kid. And then I had 1, 2, 3 older sisters that all went to school in Imperial Valley and ended up graduating from Central High School in El Centro. I had 1 sister, let's see, she's the third sister from the top. She was born and then immediately afflicted with a disease called crazy bone syndrome, and she was, she became very soon be disabled, and So she in fact at that era she didn't get to go to school. So then of course the Depression came along, and then my dad's trucking business, he was up to 14 trucks hauling produce out of Imperial Valley in the early 30s, and then and as the Depression started to settle in and things got tougher, and then he went into farming for a while, and that turned out to be a financial disaster. And ultimately, his trucking business, and then he ended up being a jobber for independent truckers. So then as we got into the late the 30s, he was, you know, he in fact, he didn't even drive anymore because he didn't have any trucks to drive himself. And then World War II came along, and then we all know what happened at Pearl Harbor, and the Army picked us all up and hauled us away. So let's see, if I covered the ground as far as old family history.
Wow, my goodness, you gave us a long answer that time. Jack, tell me about when you were living in El Centro. Where'd you live? Did you go to school? Were there other Japanese kids around in your neighborhood?
If I think your question was about how was life in El Centro. Yeah, it was pretty much you know, as a country boy kind of a thing. Our town El Centro was somewhat segregated, but you know, there was, because like where we lived in the city there weren't that many Japanese families, so there was a minimum of that in this. I can't speak for the folks who all lived out in the country, but I would say generally among the you know, the majority population of the Imperial Valley, my sense is that you know, the relationships were very good. You know, business and you know, and you know, people in the professional walks of life. I know that all of the doctors we went to were all Nisei doctors, you know, stuff like that. And so, and I think the Japanese community, so to speak, it was fairly homogeneous. And in fact, I had to laugh when I've been thinking a little bit about, you know, about the people, all of the East stays that the FBI picked up on Pearl Harbor Day. You know, I was starting to think about all those activities that I went to as a kid, you know, because of the Japanese the association down there. You know, it was a very strong group of people. So I guess the FBI had their eyes on them for a long time.
When Pearl Harbor happened that day, that Sunday, how did your family find out about it?
Oh, well, yeah, Pearl Harbor Day, I was 12, but my mother is the first to be alerted by it because she got a phone call from the grapevine that the East Stays were being picked up by the FBI. And so she was told that, okay, you bet, you know, your husband's on the list for sure. So you better pack up and get ready for him to, you know, be hauled away. And so I don't know why we remember something like this, but my dad had to pack his long johns, you know. We were all laughing, you know, as kids, you know, said, "Where are you going, Dad?" kind of a thing. But and fortunately for our family, if you recall, I just mentioned that my dad's business had floundered and he was practically out of business by the time the war started. So as a result of all of that economic, downturn for his whole business life, he had to quit the association and, you know, no longer become an officer and this and that. So because of that, the FBI did not come, you know. And finally, at about 6 o'clock that night, I remember it because there was a knock on the door and said, "Okay, Dad, goodbye." And it turned out to be his friend, Mr. Robert Hatton, who was a businessman that my dad had met in the early 20s, where he started buying gas and oil and tires from, running a service station in El Centro. And of course, they had become lifelong friends, Mr. Hatton and their dad.
What happened when you went to school the next day? Was Pearl Harbor talked about at all?
Zero. No. And you know, I reflect upon my school days there in town like that. I can't recall ever an incident, but with the only exception, I would say, the fact that the kids laughed about your name if they didn't know. Because my name is JAHSSD Kubota. So if they heard my mother say Yasuo, they didn't know what she was talking about. In fact, my older brother and I, both of us have English names. My older brother's name is Robert Toshio Kubota, and mine is Jack Yasuo Kubota, because my older sisters had begged my mom to make sure that we both had English names, so they won't be, looked down upon. My older sister Yoshiko, my next sister Aiko, the next sister was Kinoe, and then Haruyo. So all the girls only had Japanese names.
Okay, so Pearl Harbor happened, and then did your parents talk about what was going to happen next? How did you know when you were going to have to leave?
No, I think that I don't remember seeing the signs that they posted on the telephone poles and things like that. But all I remember is that the biggest thing I remember is we had what we would call today a gigantic garage sale, because the Army with the rules were each of you could only take one bag with you, just one bag, and so everything else in your house, everything that you own, that would be gone. You could just leave it in the house, leave your furniture, whatever. You're walking away from your life with only one suitcase apiece. So, I think there was a rotating fan or something that went for 50 cents. Huh? And I just, when you think about the logistics alone, can you feature what it's like to put everything you own out on the lawn? Maybe, you leave your furniture in the house. Yeah. Because you're trying to, you were trying to scrape up every coin you can find. Because remember, this was the Depression era. My dad actually had to, take hold of all of our children's student banking accounts, 25 cents a week, because he wanted to keep making his car payments, and he couldn't make his car payment. Well, it's actually his pickup. And so the GMAC came, knocked on the door, and said, "Mr. Kubota, I need the keys to your pickup truck." And I was thinking about that, and I kind of remember that now.
Yeah. Well, there was something special that your mother insisted had to go with you. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, the label of this vignette is Grandma's sewing machine. Yeah. My mother was presented with a sewing machine in 1926. It's one of those old-fashioned treadmill ones. And there was an enterprising salesman, because the instructions on how to use that sewing machine, among other things, is a booklet written in Japanese. And so it, together with the whole thing, my mother insisted that the sewing machine go with her, because she's had it since 1926. So in spite of what the rules were written down, my dad made a really strong, sturdy shipping crate for her. And then when the Army truck came to pick us all up and all of our baggage, my dad put it out there with all of our bags. And then the soldier says, "You can't take that." And my dad started yelling at me. He says, I insist. So the soldier didn't want any grief, so they loaded it up on the truck. And then when we got to the Japanese Buddhist church in El Centro, that was the assembly and debarkation center. Let's see, there were 1,500 of us being moved out, and that day was 700, and about 300 and something, 350 from Brawley, which is the other big city in Imperial Valley, and then our El Centro Assembly Center. And we got there, and then our truck unloaded all that into a big area, and there's a big semi-rig came along, open. And then they started loading all those. My dad was there kind of making sure things were okay. And then one of the higher ranking, soldiers said that can't go. And so they kept loading. And then when that higher ranking, maybe an NCO wasn't looking, he yelled at the boys to load it up, because these boys are all the sons of all the farmers, all produce. So they were trained to listen to old guys. And that's all. Grandma's sewing machine ended up in Poston 1, Arizona. So, and then just to wrap up that exciting story, Grandma's sewing machine went to Stillwater, Oklahoma, where my mom and dad moved to when they were closing the camp. Then we moved from Stillwater, Oklahoma to San Diego, where my mom moved back to California. And then that sewing machine moved to Carlsbad, California, when my mom and dad, left San Diego to live in Carlsbad with my late wife and myself, and my children who cared for my grandma and grandpa. And then it ended up in Oakland, California with my older daughter, my oldest daughter, and my only daughter. She had it completely restored, and it's just like it was brand new, and it sits there in Oakland, California. And then I have two granddaughters who both live there in the Bay Area. And so I'm sure that Grandma's sewing machine will be in good hands,
Great. Now, what about other details of that trip from the Imperial Valley out to Poston? What was that long day like?
Actually, I took that trip 20 years ago, because it was in May, about May the 20th, something like that. And then, of course, I took it here in May, and try to relive the day. In the case of this year, 80 years ago. But that was one of those days, because I think I mentioned earlier about my sister who was born with a childhood disease, and she was crippled and invalid, and she was in poor health. And my mother tried very hard to convince the Army that she would need some special attention, but to no avail. And then so we got, they put us on the truck from our home to the Buddhist church, and then we got to the Buddhist church, and then they had a big assembly of transportation, which were buses. They were kind of like school buses, and they were kind of like local municipal buses. They were not Greyhound or Trailway or anything, but like what you call a little more long distance drive. And so the drive is about 250 miles, and the temperature, like when I went, about 10 years ago, it was when I took that, it was about in the hundreds. And then when I took it this last May, it was in the hundreds, because most of the time, Imperial Valley, that's the temperature, so it was a tough ride. And then by the time we got to Poston 1, Arizona, we left El Centro at 9 in the morning. We got there, I think, about 4:30. It was a tough day. And by the time we got there, my sister was already in a frail condition. And after we got there, she really got, things got pretty rocky for her. And the Army had a dispensary or something there. And she passed away 2 days later, and in fact, she was recorded as the second death of an inmate in Poston 1. There was a service for her. They wanted to bury her in a makeshift cemetery at Poston 1, but my mother wouldn't stand still for it, and so ultimately they shipped it to San Diego and to be cremated and return the ashes to her. And so I kind of wrapped that part of it up into those ashes, just like the sewing machine, went to Stillwater, ended up back in San Diego, and she's resting peacefully there with my mom and dad at the Mount Hope Cemetery in San Diego. So yeah, it was a tough time. Yeah, it was a tough time.
Most everybody who's listening knows about what the barracks were like. Describe your Poston 1 situation. What was it like? Where'd you sleep? How many of you could be in a room? Do you remember all that?
Yeah, well, Poston 1 was a makeshift concentration camp kind of a thing. It was actually built by the Army, and it acted a little bit like the Army barracks that they would build, for where the soldiers would be housed in training or whatever. But Poston 1 is a barren desert area on an Indian reservation right next to the Colorado River, and they just barely flattened the territory. And they were, in fact, when we got there, where we were actually dumped off at, it was just, they were still working on the leveling off the field areas, and it was all sand dunes, you know what I mean? You could barely walk it. There was the 14 barracks, into each block. We were in block 26. And then, of course, the barracks themselves, if you go, you can see what those are like if you go to the Japanese American National Museum, Los Angeles. Of course, they also had one right here in San Diego that was built by the water boys. In fact, that was at the library, wasn't it, Linda? Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was.
And
Yeah.
if you haven't, and if you really, want to take the time, if you go to the men's in our visitor center, that's the real place, because there the actual barracks have been recreated, and they actually have foundations of the original foundations of the barracks themselves. And what I've been recently told about, that if you think about it, like in the latrines were like for Army soldier guys, and so the toilets were all just lined up, all open. I mean, you could play, if you were creative, you could play cards together, because right next to each other. And the showers were the same way, just one big room with a bunch of water squirting around. And so I've been told, I didn't realize this because my sister never complained about it, but there's no privacy for the women. And so that most of them decided that they would just go late in the evening and then do that. But then they all found out they were still crowded anyway. But there was some real hardship there. Like our room was like 25 by 25. And so my mom and dad, and I had 2 sisters, they're all, and then we're all in just one big 25 by 25. That's about the size of a garage, I think, about the size of a garage, 2-car garage. And then, of course, so there were sheets all around, kind of a little bit of pricey for the ladies. And then, of course, my brother and I. And as far as what's the furniture, it was not Jerome's. I mean, there was a little Army cot with the metal frame with the little springs on it, and then they had gave you bags of a bag of a cloth bag, and then you went out in the fire break area, and then they had bales of hay strung all along the road there. There's 7 barracks, right? So right along the 7 barracks area, and then you went out there and you stuffed the bag with the straw, and then you got to sleep in luxury like a real resort in Poston 1.
Did your mom and dad go to work in Poston?
Yeah, there aren't very many lazy Japanese, I'll tell you that. And so mom became a waitress in the mess hall kitchen, and then my dad became a cook. And so, there's 250 per block. So you can feature what this is like. It's just like an Army, thing, big tables out there, and they served everything family style. And then my older sister the 3 of them came to the camp, but of course, Kichan, I call her Kichan. She went to San Diego, but my older of the sisters was a nurse, who had been practicing in Pasadena, California. So initially she was hauled off to the San Anita racetracks, I think. And then, but however they worked it, she ended up there. And then because she was a nurse in Pasadena, she got to work in the dispensary. So she got paid $19 a month for her professional pursuit. And then my next over Harugo, she had, she learned all the skills of a classic woman in that era, being a secretary, accountant. Yeah, she did. In fact, she did all that for my dad in the trucking business. Even like in junior high school, she was doing that. So, and then I don't remember anything that my older brother and I did that summer of '42. That first summer we were there, and then in the summer of '43. My brother and my Haruya, my sister, they moved out of the camp, and so I was left there. But I got a job as a plumber's apprentice, and so I was being paid $12 an hour. My mom and dad got $15 an hour, $15 a month. With incident, Linda, did I tell you though that when I joined the Navy in '46, you know what the pay in the Navy was for a recruit seaman? $21 a month. I don't know why I remember that. So anyway, here I am, a plumber's apprentice, and that was a joke because we were asked to thread 6-inch piping manually, and this is one of those physical things. But the two of us didn't have enough weight or strength to even push the die around. And it took us all day to do one of them. And the guy who was running the show, he said, "You guys are a bunch of bums." We got yelled at. So anyway, that was my immediate career beginning as an apprentice plumber. So then in the summer of '44, I was able to join a construction crew. And then there we started, the crew was building concrete head walls for the takeoffs for the irrigation system that the people were building for the reservation there. And then mixing concrete, and all that, just classic labor. But then they needed a volunteer to drive a truck, and I've been driving. I've been driving since I was 12. So here I am, a big hotshot driver at 15, I guess, 14, 15, whatever it was. Yeah, so I was really a big guy. I really had fun doing that.
Yeah. Now, tell me about, how did school go for you at Poston?
Well, Poston, the school, for me as one individual, but there are others, and I found out from others as well. School was an unmitigated disaster. Just, think in terms of the fact that there are 118,000 of us. So how many are school children? Maybe 30, 40,000 students, somewhere in there. And you're there. And the task is to recruit and bring into the camps, all of them, all 8 or 10 of them, the instructors, the logistics for that kind of a, group of people, And so by the time we got in there and started sitting down, I mean, here I am, a 13-year-old, right? It's chaos, okay? And if you got bored, the hell with this, and just climbed out the window and went off and kicked cans and did something, virtually. And then, of course, too, for the people who are scholarly, no problem, right? I mean, they can get along. My older brother, but he's 2 years older than me, so he survived okay, and he's a lot smarter than me too. But and I'm sure the others. In fact, the reason I left after 2 years is because my mother, who didn't speak English, doesn't write English, and and very little. She never did embrace, the English system. but she knew how to read report cards. And so, she saw what was going on. So that's how she arranged for me to leave the camp after 2 years. Yeah. Yeah. For me particularly, but I think I mentioned to you, but my older brother had a brother-in-law who was the same age as I, and he went to the same, camp, and he did the same thing. He was as motivated as I was.
No motivation at all.
Yeah. Yep.
And so how did it go for you once you got out of camp? Did you find somebody who helped you with school?
Linda, as I reflect, the guys, you do when you get to be my age, I guess. When I think about how lucky I was to end up in Colorado Springs, Colorado, because I went there as a junior. And then in my junior year, I met a Mr. Anderson, an algebra teacher, Mr. Wilson, a chemistry teacher, and Mr. Ryerson, a physics teacher. And those three educators decided, they spotted something in this old dog that said, I might be redeemable, or rehab, or whatever. And as a consequence of those three educators, I graduated from Colorado Springs High School with exceptional grades in what they call now STEMS program, which is what science, technology, whatever all that is, engineering. And in spite of my record at Poston 1 High School, freshman and sophomore year, with those grades from Colorado Springs, Colorado, I ultimately was able to be accepted at UC Berkeley, where I got my engineering degree in 1952, which is 70 years ago. And so I have, and then another little, part of Colorado Springs, Colorado is that my sister, I was there with my older sister, Hario, and neither of us, and as far as I know, the not so very many Nisei, Issei, members of the Japanese American community, none of us were ever exposed to any kinds of bigotry or racial intolerance or anything like that. Now, my bride, Gracie Yoshihara, her family didn't go to camp. They voluntarily went to Denver, Colorado, because they ended up in Denver as a result of some relatives that lived in Amache, Colorado, and there they suffered great folks in Denver. They were not hospitable at all to the Japanese community. So anyway, I've been back to Colorado Springs sometime. I think I'd like to go back there and thank the people there.
Yeah, very good. Well, so did your family stay in Poston, and how did they leave and eventually get to back to San Diego, or to San Diego?
Yeah, okay, well, some families had properties and everything, and so they came back to their home, but in our case, there was nothing to go back to. They lost the home, they lost, we had to sell everything else. And so my sister, my oldest sister, she had gone right after high school. My mom and dad sent her to Japan to embrace the Japanese culture and to get her education. So she went to a women's college there, and then of course became a picture bride for a Japanese doctor. And so in any event, she ended up in the camp with her 2 children, and then she got a job working for the United States Navy to be a Japanese language instructor for naval intelligence officer. And they had a unit in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And so that's how she sponsored my mom and dad, to go to Stillwater. And then my brother and I were living in Colorado Springs, and, you do what your mama tell you to do. So, we got on a bus and came to Poston and picked my mom and dad up, and we went to Stillwater, Oklahoma with them. And then the environment and the climate was so bad for us that my brother and I told my mom and dad, we want to go back to Colorado. So they said, okay. And so we left there after about 2 weeks in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I hope people out there that might, I'm not bad mouthing Stillwater, but when you're a country boy from El Centro, the humidity there just make you die. And then my mother and dad, I think they lasted another 2 or 3 weeks. And so they came to San Diego. And then because my dad had a friend from his country, a countryman from Shizuoka, Japan, that was a gardener in San Diego. So that Mr. Katsumata was his name. And he and his wife let my mom and dad come, in fact, live with them until they found a place. And then that's, of course, now you're talking about a time when mom and dad, they actually, they started out just like as they did when they first got married. Just like I got married. Yeah. Mom and dad got off the boat, came to Pasadena, California, and became a housekeeper kind of a thing. And dad got a job working for this family as a chauffeur, gardener, and handyman.
So they came full circle.
Yep, full circle, right.
And what happened to you after you left the camp?
Well, I was successful and graduated from Colorado Springs High School. And then about 3 weeks before graduation, I had met a young Nisei who had enlisted in the Navy because the Navy had lifted the ban on Japanese Americans joining the Navy. And so he told me how wonderful life in the Navy would be. So, and then at that time, if you join the Navy and you serve for 2 years, you could have the rights to it, the GI Bill, Bill rights, and then get an education, a 4-year college education. So as a consequence of that, I said, okay, I'll sign up for that. And I went to the Denver recruiting station. And then, but of course, I just turned 17. And so I was 17 and 3 weeks old when I was able to go to Denver and sign up there. I had to get mom and dad's signature. And I don't know who convinced my mom and dad to sign and let me go. But I think that the seed of me going to college gave them the green light to get rid of that bozo.
So you had a little bit of a military career. Was that still the segregated Navy that you served in?
Oh yeah, I served aboard. I got assigned to a light cruiser with a crew of 200 officers and 800 enlisted men, and the ship was a segregated ship by virtue of the way it was set up that if you were a person of color, they would assign you to become a steward or a cook, and their job was to do all of the housekeeping and take care of all the needs of the office, the 200 officers, and also, or either be in the commissary, or food service thing. And then the rest of us, and when I came along, of course, they said I'd become a steward. And when I asked them what it was and told them I didn't join the Navy to be a busboy, I've already done that in Colorado Springs, So then it's okay, you can be a decade. And so they said, well, what's a decade? And they says, you'll find out when you get there. So, I just became an able-bodied seaman. And so we did everything nobody else would do, like scrubbing the deck every morning at 6 o'clock, every bit of ammunition, potatoes, anything that came aboard ship came aboard from the backs of the decades. There was no cranes, there was no forklifts or anything, put it on your shoulder and take it up. Or if, in the case of ammunition, the projectiles weigh 115 pounds. And guess who got to handle that? The smallest guy there. The damn projectile weighed almost as much as I did. But they trained you to be a machine. So And remember, $21 a month.
Oh dear. Let me ask you this. So you have a life after camp, your family is getting resettled in San Diego, your parents eventually come to live with you and your wife. At any point, did you and your parents talk about those wartime years and what had happened to you?
No. The mom and dad, no, their life, their discipline, the way they, their culture and everything. No, and of course, and the other side of that mirror image, of course, is that we children, we were all always lockstep, right? In fact, I tell people, when I left home at 15, my mother was very religious, and so we had a very, very that was a life experience in that context. But of course, I left home at 15, right? So by the time I came home out of the Navy, she sensed that I had wandered a little bit away from her idea of what life should be like. But she's the one who insisted that I go to church, and I said, okay, because you do what your mama tells you to do. I met a lady in church, a lovely lady in church, a beautiful lady in church, and she became my life partner of 44 years. Yep. And so when I tell people, you better listen to your mama, okay, I think about that part of my life.
Let's see whether there's got any questions in the chat. This is the time where, for those of you who've been listening, if you'd like to ask any questions of Jack, some of you have made some comments in the chat, I see. So Mitz, do you want to take it over, please?
So the question I had, I mean, is that at that time, what was the feeling on the part of people? This is a bad thing. There were very few people that protested it. Looking back, that was unjust, et cetera. But there was concerns and again, misinformation about sabotage and espionage, and were there concerns about espionage and sabotage and things of that sort?
If your question is framed about how the government looked upon the Japanese community, my sense would be it would be at the time, but I didn't feel anything particularly one way or the other. But now that I've gotten older and I've been exposed to a lot more education, I think of it in terms of any ethnic group that migrated to America. They would all kind of band together and keep the linkages back to their homeland. And the kind that I think about is that I've been to the Sons of Italy Hall, for example, and so they had and then in fact one of my friends here, I'm talking about in the 40s now, he actually became a husband by virtue of a picture bride arrangement with a young lady from Italy. And so so I think the FBI, and then of course in Imperial Valley, where the Japanese Association down there, for example, every year they would have a major celebration at the Imperial Valley Fairgrounds on the occasion of the Emperor's birthday, and we'd all go to the fairgrounds, and listen to the speeches in Japanese and sing the Japanese national anthem, and it's a what is it, Tenno Heika Banzai, for those of you who've watched, familiar with the Japanese language, which is Banzai is their one high five kind of a thing. So so in that context, Linda, I think I mentioned the fact that how the government works. I think I mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, but I had a dear friend whose husband was an intelligence officer, an Nisei intelligence officer, and he was assigned to the Japanese occupation forces. And one of his jobs after the hostilities ended was he set up a surveillance a camera over in front of the Russian embassy in 1946. And his job was 24/7. They were taking pictures of every person who entered and left the Russian embassy. I mean, that's what the war was just getting over, right? But somebody decided that it was important to provide surveillance on the Russians. So, you know, I don't know, does that answer your question?
That's a good answer, Jack. Let me say there's a tangential one here in terms of, was there ever a feeling for Jack to prove his loyalty to the country after leaving Poston, either in the military or in college or in any other setting? Any sentiments that you needed to prove your loyalty?
Well, for me personally, no, I'm just a country boy from El Centro, you know. I'm not that much of a deep thinker. No. When I joined the Navy, you know, I signed, I raised my hand, signed my oath. In fact, I struggled a little bit when I read in the paper here that some servicemen decided that they didn't need to get a vaccination or something. My God, aboard ship, when you were told you were going to get a vaccination, they'd yell at you at about 7 in the morning. And by that evening, all 1,000 of us got shot up. And it was generally with more than one serum. I mean, they shoot you up with everything. No questions asked. I guess maybe would you call you know, maybe a hard head or something? I don't know.
I was just gonna say, I noticed a question about whether, Jack, did you ever take judo classes when you were in Poston 1?
No, but before that, while I was a youngster in Imperial Valley, no, I take it back. In Poston, we did sumo.
She asked the question because her dad was a judo instructor at Poston 1.
Oh, okay. No, I did sumo, and then before the war in Imperial Valley, I did kendo. When my sister came back from Japan, she brought kendo gear for my older brother and me. And I've never forgotten that episode either.
Hey, somebody asked about what activities did you participate in besides school and work at Poston? We didn't talk about, tell me about your dad's garden and about going out to collect the wood out in the hills.
My dad, gardening was his hobby, I guess, among other things. And so as soon as we got there, you know, he said, we got to do something, this barren desert, you know. And so he went out to the Colorado River, which is about 5 miles west of the camp, and got little sucklings or like the cottonwood trees and things like that. And we started a garden right around our barracks right away. And then my dad also liked a fish pond. So we got some old redwood, you know, boards, and then we got some tar paper, and, you know, we made a little fish pond there. And so we ended up with a, you know, tried to have a sort of an oasis garden thing there in front of our barracks, just, you know, just to cheer us up a little bit, you know, because it was my dad, you know. And then, you know, did I tell you though, and my dad, you know, we didn't have any fertilizer, right? So my dad has my brother and me dragging a burlap sack around the desert, picking up cow chips so that there'd be fertilizer for the gardens. And then, you know, just you come up with all kinds of things to do. And then somebody figured out that there were some hills to the east of Poston that had what they call ironwood. And ironwood is you know, a lesser, was a couple of steps away from petrified wood, but it was like a rock, but it wasn't a rock. You could file it and all that. So we used to go and go up in the hills and you know, with the knapsack and pick that stuff up. So that's the kind of things we did. And of course, in the camp itself, you know, they had, you know, baseball. I don't remember any football, but they had baseball, basketball. I think Camp 3 had a they actually built the swimming pool. The evacuees built the swimming pool. We didn't have it in Camp 1, but we all went to the Colorado River. You know, that's where we enjoyed, you know, no surfing, but other than that, yeah, that was fun. That was fun.
So there's a question about lessons learned from your camp experience, Jack. What kind of lessons do you hope the current generation or would learn from your experience?
You know, being the country boy that I am, you can tell I'm not that much of, I don't think I'm that much of a deep thinker. If it's anything, what I learned, I think more than anything, is the resilience of my mom and dad and watching them as they started their life all over again. And I say to myself, wow, I wonder, you know, what my life would be like if I had to face those kinds of circumstances. You know, as far as how I got there and why I got there, and the ethnicity issue, you know, what life is like if you're a person of color, you know, born and raised in America, you know, all those kinds of issues, you know, for me, if someone really wanted to ask me about it, you know, if I sat there and you know, I think I'd have, if I started writing bullets down or something, you know, what is it? But, you know, my engineering career, you know, boy, I can't remember a time and place where I met people in my business, both my fellow engineers, but my clientele. You know, I served in the public sector for the first 7 years. Yeah, first 7 years of my engineering career. And now I'm in my 71st year as an engineering career. And, you know, I really can't, you know, what is it? I have no complaints as to where my life has been. I really don't. I'm so grateful. But when I think about my mom and dad, you know, having to start all over again, you know, they come to San Diego. My dad had a knapsack with his gardening tools that he saved, you know, he brought back from Poston, right? And then he gets on the trolley in the bus to go find people that he can garden for that have lawnmowers and everything there on the premises. My mother getting on the trolley, you know, or the bus, going and finding places where she could clean houses. She'd get on the ferry and go to Coronado to clean houses for the Navy officers. You know, at their ages, with 50s, with 60s. And then when my dad was made enough money, he ended up buying an old Chevrolet car, took the seat out in the back, made enough room so he could buy a lawnmower. And then so he got more business customers. And then my mom and dad, my mom found a job going out to Encanto and being a farm worker for the Ito family out there, picking beans, all that. Then she got a job working in the cannery at the foot of 28th Street. And I used to go pick her up, you know, and bring her home. And the aroma of her being in the cannery for 8 hours would cause the hair to rise on my head because, you know, it was very, very strong. She was exposed to a lot of stuff at the cannery. Never flinched, not one day. Came home, cooked for my mom, the dad, and she was a classic homemaker at home. So I don't know if that's a long answer to you, sir, but you know, if there's such a thing as a life of an immigrant or whatever, and put a label on them, but ultimately, you know, it's a case of how life tests you and how you respond. And I feel very lucky that I had the kind of parenting, and I'm proud of my ethnicity and overall, yeah. I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm proud, by the way, yeah. And if anything else, I'm very proud to be an American. you know, enough said.
Jack, there's a question. Did you meet any Native Americans on that Indian reservation of Poston?
No, I don't recall ever having any interaction with the local tribe people there. You know, the Army put us all there, and then I think they called it the War Relocation Authority, WRA, and I remember all the trucks and cars and everything. It said the Department of Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs. But beyond all that, and then their offices were across the highway to the east of our camp. And then, in fact, if you go there, that's the only, well, no, the remnants of Camp 1 are there. And then across the street is what would be what I call the administrative enclave there. So, but the Indian reservation, you know, it has a very, very interesting new exhibit in a new historical site in downtown Parker there. They used to have it in the Indian reservation headquarters, but in fact, I think in the next week or two, there's a group, a Poston group that are going to go down there for a 3-day journey back to Poston on the 80th anniversary. Maybe I'll get a chance to do that next year.
Jack, besides the kendo and sumo, any other activities outside of school and things of that sort? What other things were activities in camp?
Oh, as far as you know, teenagers had their you know, social functions. Our block, we had one of the rooms of a barracks. You know, was the boys club. You know, and I think I was too young to join the boys club, so I guess they probably played cards or snuck in booze or something. Well, I don't know what teenagers do. And then the older folks, they had I saw many of them. They would play the go. It's a Japanese. I don't know. Would that be like a checkers or chess or something like that? Is go. It's white and little round pebble kinds of things. Anyway, yeah, I remember that. And then, yeah, no.
You went to the movies. You went to the movies.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, they did have movies. That's right. It was out in the fire break. They'd bring a big screen, and then summertime was no problem, but in the wintertime, you know, you'd really freeze the south side of your body and the north side, whatever. So we got these 1-gallon cans that you know, you see in the Smart and Final places like that have big vegetables and fruits and things. So we used to take those cans, and of course they used those in the mess hall, and then we'd put charcoal in there and light it up and put it underneath our camper seat, and then that's the way we'd survive out there. Because you know, even though it's a desert all summer, in the winter, you know, it gets freezing there sometimes. You know, so it could get. But yeah, the movies were fun. Yeah, they were fun.
Did you carve any birds for girlfriends? I know about these. I've seen these carved birds. I had no idea they were had anything to do with being presents. But what do I know? Any insights into carving birds, or what the values of those things were, or gifts to others?
Well, Linda has one that is a beautiful carving, because you know it's wood, so you could file it, you know, and then you could use sandpaper, and then you smooth the sandpaper, and they could actually polish. And jewelry, and it was very popular. I think there are lots of examples of that at the National Museum, and then I think I saw some at the Japanese tea garden in Balboa Park. Yeah, there's some people with just real artistry, you know, real artistry. And my dad did it, but I don't recall he did he got really elaborate with stuff. I looked at it, but I don't have any artistic things.
Any other legacy items or things that are mementos, or I'm not sure what the right word is?
My mom did summarize, her experiences, and I guess in that context, we left El Centro with with my mom and dad, my 3 sisters, my brother and me, and the sewing machine. When all that ended, she came back to San Diego. Her son had joined the Army. Her 2 daughters had gone on to their pursuits, and she came home with my sister's ashes and her husband and the sewing machine. But then, she moved right on with her life. So when my children were taking care of grandma and grandpa here in Carlsbad, I told them, okay, you better take care of them. And so between them and my late wife, I feel like, in fact, people once in a while, they'll talk about, the reparations and the $20,000 that each of us who went to camp that were survivors and living that received. I've always thought that I hope that money helped make their life a little bit better. So if there's such a thing as a legacy, that I'm grateful that my mom and dad didn't give up on me. They made sure that things would work out. Things would work out.
How did you get out of camp to get those cow patties and ironwood? I thought there were barbed wire and all that stuff.
Oh well, that's why with grandma with grandma's sewing machine too. That's what, for whatever reason, I guess my mama was brilliant that said she needed that sewing machine, because in camp she used that sewing machine, to make dresses for my sister, or whatever, kind of a thing, and made us shirts or whatever. And so no, she was a heck of a seamstress. She in fact, during the Depression era, she'd actually go maybe go to a Goodwill basket and find old clothing, and she made a leisure jacket for me that most people thought was brand new, store bought. But yeah, she was a good seamstress. So and then the barracks were being like that, and so everybody decided. Remember, I told you about the fish pond and stuff, but the faucet. Every barracks had one faucet on the inside end, and we were at the front end of the barracks, so we had to buy a galvanized iron pipe so that we could pipe the fresh water from up one end, and the barracks are 100 feet long. So we ended up having to get from the catalog 100 feet of galvanized iron pipe and fittings. In fact, we worked the deal out with all of our neighbors. We all chipped in, and we put faucets at each of the 4 units. It's 100 by 25, and so each room had 25 feet, so that 100 feet. So we divided it up 4 ways, and so we were at the end. So by golly, then we ended up with a hot plate, and so mom and dad could boil water for tea, and then we had fresh water for the fish pond and the garden.
You're ordering stuff from the catalog. We're talking the Sears catalog or the Ward?
Oh yeah, Sears. No, I just remember the Sears catalog, but Monkey Ward was the same. I'm sure. They were regular competitors.
Any other things that were ordered from the catalogs that were kind of part of life in camp?
Yeah. My folks left El Centro virtually, penniless, other than what we got from the yard sale. Remember, my dad lost everything. End of the Depression, end of the finances. So even our children's bank accounts, there wasn't much left. Oh, I should add, by the way, folks, we were never without food. Okay, we're never without food. And thanks to the generosity of all the farmers that my dad used to haul produce for, so we didn't have them, if you had a stew and you had some bacon rind or whatever you had, you know what I mean? That was good enough. Yeah, we got along. if you had a one pork chop, you could really party, you know, for a family of 6.
All these little anecdotes, these little aspects that really gives it much more sense of 3 dimension to the camp and prior to that and after that. So this is, again, just been wonderful. I appreciate, Jack, your sharing your stories, and Linda, you're doing the interview, a process that was, again, just so engaging. So again, we thank the Japanese American Historical Society.
Thank you again for the opportunity to share Jack and his stories with the San Diego JACL. And we had a nice crew here tonight. Nice questions. And we want to thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And we'll look forward to other opportunities.
May I make one final comment?
Of course, Jack.
I want to publicly thank Linda for your leadership and all the information that you've acquired over the years, working so hard for the Historical Society. This old dog would not be a part of tonight's program without being inspired by your leadership, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Jack. I appreciate that. And thanks for inviting us to be here tonight.
Well, and again, thank both of you, Linda. You know, again, we appreciate both your good work as well as Jack's. And so again, thank you all, and we'll look forward to the future.